Shabbat Shalom, everyone. What a week. Much different energy in this room than there was last week. Wow, okay. If that's the energy now, then this will be a good sermon for you. Okay, so last week, when Rabbi Pinchas gave his sermon about the heavy feeling of defeatism hanging around us and encouraged us not to fall into despair, that we couldn't give up yet and act as though everything was a foregone conclusion, and then, well, 24 hours later, we saw he was exactly right. So either he's a prophet, or I got to figure out what to say today that might be true tomorrow. Someone told me maybe to say something about the Dodgers, but I have to say I'm really not the person to say that. So here we are. In the wake of this week, there have been so many memes. I'm sure you've seen them. And there is especially one very niche one that spoke to me this week. And this meme was, how will this political moment affect your shul this week? In which, in just a few lines, the creator, Shoshana, lays out the very obvious parsha connections that all rabbis will use this Shabbat. So in addition to not knowing enough about the Dodgers to put that into the world today, I also felt that I had already been completely defeated by a meme this week before I even got started. So let me tell you a little bit about the parsha this week, and you'll understand exactly what the meme was saying. We have this week the conversation between Moshe and God, where God reminds Moshe he will not be the one going forward with the people. Moshe says, it's okay, it's time to appoint someone else to lead from here. Then they have a conversation about who that person might be. We have a transfer of power in the highest leadership of the people, from Moshe to Joshua, a new generation. Are we following? That is just the beginning, people. Unrelated to that, and in a completely different part of the parsha, we have 5 women, Benot Tzlofchad, the daughters of Tzlofchad, who make a plea to Moshe that they too should inherit land. They have no brothers, and up to that point it meant they would be able to get no land. They challenge Moshe in an unprecedented way to fight for equality in land ownership, and then they win. These 5 women, Moshe takes the case to God, and God says they're right. They too should have land. Women have this new power they had never dreamed about before. That's it. And that's pretty much all there is to say, so Shabbat Shalom. But really, you can see how the meme wrote itself. There is so much here to connect to this political moment, one that feels completely unrecognizable from where we found ourselves just 7 days ago. How much of a difference a week can make. We could not have predicted last week what would happen. We could not have seen it coming. Up until the exact moment things changed, we expected them not to. But they did. And yet, what Rabbi Pinchas said last week is still completely true. It's not over until it's over. A day or a week or a month can change everything. So I am not here to talk about the connections to good and selfless leadership or to a transfer of power or to women's leadership, though it's tempting. Thank you, Shoshana. But instead, I am here to continue Rabbi Pinchas' sermon from last week, a part 2, as it were. This one is, what now? We've moved out of our defeatism a bit, we're fired up, and now we have work to do. This week, many people reported they have not felt a surge of excitement and energy and commitment like this politically since 2008. Fundraising numbers are skyrocketing. Nearly 40,000 new voters registered between Sunday and Tuesday of this week. The vast majority under the age of 35. People are ready, and now we have to get to work. As I mentioned, this parsha lends itself in so many ways to this moment, but in addition to that, it's also a parsha with a lot of seemingly disparate stories and pieces and characters. We have another census, the end of the story of Pinchas, the zealot, mention of Korach's sons, the Levites, the cycle of holidays and the sacrifices on each of those, God's own sin offering, and plenty more. As always, I think there's broader wisdom in it, a message for this new moment in which we find ourselves. And it begins with the census. We've had a few of these in the Torah, but this is the last one, the third and final, taken in the 40th year of their wandering in the desert, a last attempt to take stock of who is there, who is present for what will unfold. This census is focused on land appropriation, and it is a bit different. We see some unexpected groups here. We're going to look at just 3 of them this morning, the sons of Korach, the Levites, and Benot Tzlofchad, the daughters of Tzlofchad, we first encounter the sons of Korach, which on its face seems impossible. Just 3 weeks ago, in Parshat Korach, we read that all the people who belonged to Korach died. In the face of Korach's rebellion against Moshe and Aaron, Vatiftach haaretz et pia v'tivla otam, the ground opened up and swallowed them all. Ve'et batehem ve'et kol ha'adam asher leKorach ve'et kol ha'rachush. This included all of their belongings, everyone who belonged to Korach. Were his sons not part of that? Did they not belong to Korach? How are they still here 10 chapters later being mentioned in this parsha? Sforno, the 16th century Italian commentator, says, Kol ha'adam asher leKorach, all of the people who belong to Korach means all of the people who had made common cause with him in his rebellion. Ulachein lo metu banav shelo nigraru acharav bazeh. We shouldn't be surprised that his sons did not die because they didn't actually belong to the family spiritually or philosophically. They didn't follow him in his actions. In fact, they instead chose a path of righteousness, one that led them to a life of singing praises to God, many of our psalms later attributed to them. They were outsiders in their family, they were alone, they felt othered, and that spurred them to make different choices, honorable choices that in the end saved their lives. That's the first unexpected group in the census. Second, we have the Levites, the priests. They have a strange role to play in this group. They are critical to the service of the people, but they are also not actually counted in the census. They do not inherit land, but they are critical to the functioning of the people. They serve the community, have a special connection with God, are the keepers of the tabernacle. It says in the census, Lo hodpaktu b'toch b'nei Yisrael. The Levites were not part of the regular enrollment of the Israelites. They did not have a traditional role, but they are still mentioned here. We still get part of their story in this parsha. And the third group we have is the daughters of Tzlofchad. So yes, Shoshana, despite what I said at the beginning, I'm bringing them into this anyway. She was right. Their father died and they had no brothers, and so they fight for this different reality, a more equitable and just one where women too can inherit land. And as we know, they're successful. God immediately sides with them, a decision that really was unexpected in their world, that could not have been predicted. But here they are, these daughters, all 5 of them, each of them named in this parsha, and inheriting this land. We have these 3 groups of people, outliers in a way, and seemingly disconnected one from the other, but found together in this parsha, and I don't think it's a coincidence. As I said, this census is different from the ones we've had before, especially from the one at the beginning of the book of Numbers. The prior census was one for military purposes and enrollment. It simply lists all the tribes, the groups, numbers, statistics, cut and dry, as we think of biblical and contemporary censuses to be. This census, on the other hand, is about land distribution, and in this one, everyone is listed by name, as we see with these groups. Sometimes even pausing to give some more information about someone listed, people are listed with families and by lineage. After all, none of us just fell out of a coconut tree. Even these unexpected groups are there. The sons of Korach, who we thought had died, the Levites, who aren't part of the technical census, the daughters of Tzlofchad, who are women with no brothers who inherit land. This census, as it turns out, is for everyone. Regardless of how they arrived or where they came from, they are all there. All of these people who could be easily overlooked, these roles they play that could easily fly under the radar, people who could easily have felt like they had no role at all. But they matter. And we are better for hearing and knowing their stories. Our community is better for it. These moments tell us something important about this Israelite group, who they were and what mattered to them. What kind of future they were working toward, a future that had space for every single one of them. And their lineage is included partially to show the contrast between what they knew and what they chose for themselves. The sons of Korach choosing righteousness and closeness to God, the Levites choosing service, the daughters of Tzlofchad choosing a plea for the equity they knew was right. They fought for a reality different than the one they saw in front of them. We find ourselves now, today, poised to do the same, to fight for something different from what we've seen. We have to figure out how we will work for the more just and righteous and equitable world we believe to be possible. This is just the beginning. Like this ragtag group in the census, we are a group made up of all sorts of people and experiences and gifts and hopes and fears. It's going to take every single one of us. And we have to center the stories that have historically been pushed aside, marginalized, overlooked, and excluded. We know, and the Torah reminds us, that we are better that way. Those are the stories that need to be told. We are better for centering the voices of LGBTQ+ people, and especially our trans siblings, whose rights are increasingly under attack. We are better for centering the voices of women and non-binary and trans people of color who have historically again and again and again put themselves on the line for all of us and for democracy while getting very little in return. We are better for listening to young people, our newest voters, equipped with creativity and insight and wisdom many of us continue to be awed by every day. We are better for centering the voices of working class and middle class people who work multiple jobs and still struggle to afford rent as housing costs skyrocket. We are better for centering the voices of people whose bodily autonomy was destroyed when Roe v. Wade was overturned and are now suffering in states all over the country to make decisions about their own pregnancies and bodies. This is what's on the line on the ballot this fall, all of this. And these stories are our stories. They are not just fringe or tangential. This is what matters. This is our current story, and this is who we are. We need all of us. Like Korach's sons, the Levites, and Zelophehad's daughters, we belong here, our stories and our struggles and our lives. And also, we need to figure out where we fit into this people, into the immense task that faces us. As much as we may feel like an outsider or feel unsure, we have work to do, and we need each other. We need to find our way. There isn't a right answer or a right way to jump in. We just have to jump somewhere. On Sunday, the organization Win with Black Women gathered 44,000 Black women within a matter of hours. They met on Zoom and raised over $1.5 million. And then, following their lead and taking the baton from them, excuse the Olympics image, white women met on Thursday night to do the same. Over 160,000 white women met on Zoom, the biggest Zoom call the company had ever had. They had never had to accommodate over 100,000 people before. And over the course of 2 hours, they raised over $2 million, and by Friday morning, it was 8.5. Many of these women have never been involved in politics before, have never called a potential voter, have never gotten on a fundraising Zoom, have never canvassed for any candidates. And yet, there they were, all of them, hundreds of thousands of them. There is no wrong way to show up in this work. The only wrong way is to not show up at all. Look what is possible in just a week. A week and some incredible coalitions working toward the kind of future we want to see. There is a place for all of us. The place for you may look different from that of your parents or friends or what you've seen before, just like Korach's sons and the Levites and Zelophehad's daughters who chose for themselves respectively lives of righteousness, of service, and of justice. There are so many ways in. Maybe you're a seasoned door knocker, flying across the country to knock on doors in certain counties or states, or maybe that's the most terrifying proposition you've ever heard. No problem. Leave the door knocking to someone else, but that doesn't mean you're off the hook. Do some text banking instead, saving you from the face-to-face interactions with strangers whose responses you can't predict. Or write some postcards. Donate as much money as you can to the candidates and causes that are closest to your heart. Whoever and whatever is giving you hope right now, they need your help. Or maybe none of that feels like something you can do. No problem. Do something else. Make a pledge to talk to your own friends and family, often the most important and hardest task. Talk to your neighbors. Mobilize people where you are, at your kid's school or the park or your yoga class. Or maybe talk to someone who's sitting next to you on a plane. Register some new voters. Maybe all of those feel too intimidating too. No problem. Find something else to do. Learn, organize, and of course, in 101 days, vote. Just this week, I heard a story of women whose politics were very different from their partners and from most people in their area. They thought they were alone. So they told their families they were in a book club and then snuck out once a week to volunteer for candidates they believed in. There is always a way. Get creative, show up, make something happen. It may not be in the 24 hours immediately after giving a sermon, but certainly over the next 100 days, we can do something. Whoever you are, however you got here, we need you. The accounting will include all of us. Let's get to work. Shabbat Shalom.